Tonight on In the Life, the body politic. Oh, to be young and gay.
Him and 3 of his friends started just beating the crap out of me.
And Harvey Fierstein's Year in Review.
So it's June again.
Take Me Out's Denis O'Hare hosts In the Life, America's gay and lesbian news magazine.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation, the Gill Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, the Pride Foundation, the Ted Snowden Foundation, the Reed Williams Foundation, Adam, a funding collaborative empowering queer youth, Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, Michael A. Leppin, Daniel H. Renberg and Eugene Kabalowski, and the annual support of In the Life members like you.
Welcome to In the Life's 12th annual Pride Special. I'm Denis O'Hare. Tonight, America's gay and lesbian news magazine is here at Rootstein Mannequin Showroom in New York to celebrate LGBT Pride Month with The Body Politic, an examination of our community's health. Now, whether it's the economy of the AIDS epidemic, the growing concerns of our community's seniors, getting into or coming out in professional sports, or fighting for our physical safety, our body politics are anything but simple and everything but trivial. Tonight, LGBT elders find a senior world ill-prepared for their arrival. Heroism under apartheid. And special guest Patricia Clarkson takes us out. Hey, who is that handsome man? And we begin with Body Positive. Designer John Bartlett returns to In the Life with a question. Now, in 2003, what should AIDS look like?
In 1994, Keith Lewis, president of the LA-based modeling firm, the Morgan Agency, received a request. A client was looking for an HIV-positive model to appear in an ad for Advera, a new supplement developed specifically for those with HIV. At a time when a positive diagnosis could render one unemployable, and very few in the entertainment industry were even talking about HIV, Lewis held a casting call to find any models willing to go public with their HIV status.
We thought we'd have, a few people. We had close to 100. They helped us understand what this disease was and how the face of the disease had changed.
Out of that first casting call, Lewis found Chris Craze, and the first ad with an openly HIV-positive model hit the newsstand.
There was criticism that there was an ad that was out there, and there was a hunky guy in this ad that obviously was not HIV positive. Chris was hurt, and he was shocked. He penned this letter to a newspaper in San Francisco explaining that he was indeed HIV positive, and this was something that he would use.
The national debate over a healthy-looking model like Craze, representing the HIV community, inspired Lewis to start a new division called Proof Positive. Juliet, Bruce, Beverly, Dion, and Jason are part of that division.
I think it's important for people to see my face in an ad for an HIV medication, because they can put a face to somebody that uses the medication, and they can also understand that you can lead a normal life.
The biggest thing now is so many people are ashamed of it, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Around that time, I was about the only woman, African-American woman, heterosexual woman, that was willing to stand up and say that I was an HIV-infected woman.
Still, from the very beginning, this sort of AIDS drug advertising has drawn harsh criticism. Mark Milano is an AIDS educator and a member of ACT UP.
I think, frankly, these are advertising people who know that if you want to market a product, you put a cute, attractive person in the ad, and that's how you market your product. And that it's giving particularly young gay men the impression that AIDS is over, that it's controllable, and that it's not that scary to get HIV.
The power of advertising to create imagery around any kind of product, any kind of population is very strong.
Howard Buford is the founder and CEO of Prime Access, a marketing and advertising firm that targets marginalized populations.
Many people have forgotten just how absolutely devastating AIDS was in the very beginning, and of course it still is, but not to the mortality rate that we were seeing then. You know, early on, you know, one of the first images put out by Benetton, it was a very sick, almost Christ-like figure of suffering.
A lot of people hated that ad and thought it was very exploitative.
Ann Northrup is a member of the New York City chapter of ACT UP.
At that point in the epidemic, we needed to see the reality of people dying, human beings putting a face on it.
But in the midst of an epidemic, mass media images like the Benetton ad also confirmed the belief that people with HIV looked a certain way, namely sick, dying, and predominantly white, images that for the public defined the face of AIDS. In 1997, the FDA began to allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise directly to consumers. This decision roughly coincided with the marketing of protease inhibitors, a new class of drugs. The FDA's decision set off a flood of advertising, and the new ads raised new questions. This Crixivan ad was one of the earliest and most controversial.
It really gave the impression that having HIV was just about taking some pills and then you would look fabulous and be fabulous. Presenting these drugs as simple, easy to take, side effect-free medications is very misleading.
Jason Jasnos appeared in the Crixivan ad.
I was taking Crixivan at the time, so, you know, I am an outdoors person. There was nothing untrue about that particular ad.
When someone looks at the ads and says that these individuals are too glossy, they're too healthy looking, I almost become angry because the people that we work with in this division are HIV positive. They are indeed part of this disease.
I think these campaigns are not inappropriate in showing people that there is hope. Now, at the same time, a lot of it is unrealistic, and we don't see ads of people sort of wasting away.
For people who are living with HIV, it hurts. It hurts to look at somebody who is suffering. And so to have an advertisement that shows suffering and shows pain, it's like, what's the message there?
A more recent ad campaign that drew criticism was this Life Goes On campaign for Sustiva. Proof-positive models Dion and Bruce both appeared in those ads.
The FDA pinpointed that ad saying that we, the models, looked too healthy.
Okay, that's almost like saying that somebody might look too white to be Latino.
So what is it? How am I supposed to look? I mean, we work hard. Those of us, some of us who are HIV infected, we work very hard to be healthy and to look good and to keep ourselves together. I mean, sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes we do get sick. But those of us who manage to stay healthy, it's been through medication or not to take medication. Some of us are just naturally healthy.
But beyond the aesthetics of the ads, more far-reaching questions are being asked about this kind of direct-to-consumer advertising and its effect on the accessibility and costs of these drugs.
The drug companies are very willing to do all this advertising, but less willing to really make the drugs accessible to everyone who needs them. We are seeing this currently in international issues around the world where millions and millions of people are dying for lack of access to these drugs. But even in this country, it's been a terrible problem with people unable to afford the drugs and with government programs designed to help running out of money to this day.
A look at the wholesale prices of some of today's drugs show that costs are high.
The companies are spending far more money on marketing than they do on research. They claim they have to charge these really high prices for these drugs because they need the money for more research, but much more of the money is going into marketing. So we really question if it's wise to spend all this money on these ads, and they also raise the price of the drugs.
The expense of the advertising for HIV medications, I believe, in my experience, has very little to do with the cost of the medications. There's been almost no HIV advertising in the television arena. The production budgets there are much higher than they are for print. So if you look at HIV advertising, it's been unusually efficient as far as the costs of the advertising itself.
Pharmaceutical companies also have the highest profit margin of any industry in the world. Advertising is certainly a significant expense and a significant part of their cost, but just the profit margins they take is an unconscionable part of their cost.
We think a decision to use a drug is a decision between a patient and the doctor. They need to look at the drugs, to look at the data, to make a decision what drug is appropriate and to take that drug. We say, cut the advertising, cut the price of the drugs. You know, people can make these decisions for themselves without ads.
Still, many of those without access to care use drug ads as a way to find out what sort of treatment is available.
We have had reports from people who, in focus groups, say, I didn't have a doctor. They typically go to the emergency room for their medical care, where they have actually torn the advertising out of a magazine, shown up at the emergency room and said, can this help me?
People still don't know enough about how treatment works, and this is a downside of the advertising because all it says essentially is take drugs. If you have HIV, take drugs. When in fact, what we have said as activists for 15 years now is delay treatment, wait until you really need it.
Ironically, it's the revenue generated by these ads that promotes access to information on a broader scale.
Many publications rely on these ads for their funding, and that includes PAWS, HIV+, ANU. So I think actually many of those companies might fold if the drug company ads dried up.
I think that advertising is one way of getting word out to a lot of people. It should not be the only channel.
Well, maybe the interesting thing about having an industry of AIDS ads is that there is a market. You know, there wouldn't be those ads if they didn't think they could make money. So in some ways that's a good thing because the minute the possibility of a market disappears, so will the research.
I remember back in the 70s with the WTA, Renee Richards, who used to be Richard Raskin, wanted to play on the tour, and the women just went crazy. What I did, because I didn't really understand transgender, I had heard of it, but I didn't really understand it. I called up Renee and I said, can I talk to you, can I listen to you? So went over to her place and listened to her for 4 hours. I went back to the WTA, to the women at the WTA. I said, you guys, the gig's up. She's going to be on the WTA tour. She's a woman now. And if you can't beat her, too bad. She's been my mentor as far as understanding the world of being a transgender. I'm Billie Jean King, and you're watching In the Life.
The debate around AIDS representation points up our community's image consciousness. So, in the fervor over how to represent ourselves, what gets left out entirely? Pamela Sneed considers this in The Golden Years.
Between 2 and 4 million gay and lesbian Americans are senior citizens. While gay and straight seniors share concerns about housing, income, and health care, gay seniors sometimes find themselves uncared for and often invisible. It takes no more than a few snapshots of gay society to see how obsessed our culture is with youth. So, what's the problem? One word, ageism. Discrimination against those who are older. It's nothing new to the general population, but experts say it's much worse in the gay community. Want proof? Just flip through the pages of your local gay newspaper and try doing what Ken South did.
One Friday afternoon, I went through it and just counted all the pictures in one episode of the paper. There were like 152 pictures in that particular volume of the newspaper. Of that, 3 were people that I could think were over 50 years old. 2 were obituaries, and 1 was an ad for Marlon Brando for a new movie.
South is an expert on LGBT aging issues and co-authored a landmark study called Outing Age on federal policy and the needs of gay seniors. He says in our society, if you're not young, you're invisible.
Somehow they think that people over 40 just drop off the face of the earth. There's no gay people over 40. Or they have very slanted, very sad images of what it means to be an old gay person.
But old and sad are not synonymous. Carl Martin is proof. Carl is 76. Though he realized he was gay in his teens, he remained in the closet right through a marriage that lasted nearly 50 years. Carl started coming out just 6 years ago, shortly after his wife passed away. Today, he has a partner and newfound freedom.
Now that I am free to be myself, I'm more happy than I've ever been in my life.
Carl is in good health. But like many men his age, he has a slow-growing prostate cancer and sees the doctor regularly to be sure it stays in check. Carl hasn't told his doctors about his sexual orientation, but he also doesn't let that barrier stop him from getting the proper health care needed at his age.
Your dealings with the doctor is as patient and doctor. It doesn't have to be as a particular kind of sexual person and the doctor.
That choice works for Carl, but certainly not for all gay seniors. In fact, the need to hide one's sexual orientation is so stressful for some that they avoid health care and home care altogether.
If you're 75, 80 years old, you grew up in the 50s, you grew up in the McCarthy era, if you were a lesbian school teacher in the early 50s or late 40s and you came out, you could easily end up in a state hospital with a lobotomy.
Today, of course, things are much different. Still, even beyond the problems in nursing homes we've all heard about, there are a number of well-documented cases of substandard care and discrimination in healthcare settings against gays and lesbians. So, many who do use mainstream social services work very hard to hide their sexual identity from their caregivers.
Gay people are going to stay in the closet as much as they can. They will deny who they are because they're even more dependent on people. They're dependent every minute of every day for their nourishment, for their well-being, for their medical care.
So several studies, including Kensau's, call for training those who staff home health agencies and nursing homes to combat this lack of awareness and sensitivity.
When you start talking these issues to some of these professionals, their eyes glaze over and they look like, it's like deer in the headlights, you know, they're like, oh my God, you know, I never thought of that, you know, that, you know, two, you know, men in their 80s could love each other? Well, I suppose that's true.
I think that old people are feeling like sitting ducks in a sense.
Esther Katzman is out to change that with Senior Health Resources in Washington, D.C. SHR is a nonprofit she created to provide home health and other social services to the older LGBT community. Her first big project is One Potential Small Solution, a survey of local providers from doctors' offices and health clinics to assisted living facilities and nursing homes. The goal? To let seniors know how aware or unaware those agencies are of LGBT concerns.
There were several places who actually either refused to answer those questions or didn't really know whether they were gay people in their facility or didn't know if they were gay clients, if they weren't a residential facility. They didn't know, they didn't ask, and they didn't have any mechanisms of actually making people feel comfortable enough to come out.
Esther says it's a matter of education, and the process is a slow one. So meanwhile, she and her team are looking beyond healthcare into other needs of the aging gay population. One possibility, developing retirement housing for the LGBT community. And she's not the only one. Currently, there are two major LGBT retirement communities in existence, the Palms of Minnesota and the Resort on Carefree Boulevard, both in Florida. But neither offers assisted living. So there's a push for communities that provide health care and home care services and to make them affordable.
The other thing, though, that I think is really needed are the social services for people who don't have the big bucks, who can't get, you know, the big homes and the, you know, go to communities.
But If a gay retirement community is right for you, the fact is there just isn't much out there, especially when compared to the wide availability of options in mainstream society. And the dozen or so that are in the works are in the very early stages, with just a website or a brochure to show for their efforts so far. From our town in San Francisco to Stonewall communities in Boston, birds of a feather for women near Santa Fe, even a place for us in Cleveland, Ohio.
Let's face it, you'd have more fun because everybody would understand. Yeah, your comfort level would be higher, but then again,
Meryl Curley and her partner Pat Sagat say they like the idea of a gay retirement community, but aren't sure it's right for them. Like many, they hope to stay where they are and use home care services in their local area if needed and if sensitive.
I don't want to have to hide who I am, and I want the staff to be very sensitive to my needs.
Retirement is still several years away from Meryl and Pat, so for now they've got more pressing concerns, most of them financial, another big issue for the aging LGBT community. Why? Because same-sex partners do not have the legal protections that straight couples do. So, Meryl and Pat are trying their best to protect themselves. They've had 3 key legal documents drawn up to ensure that they get the recognition they deserve in a time of crisis.
Your worst case scenario would be that something happens to your partner and you go to the hospital and they basically kick you out of the room because you're not family. Well, you know, Pat and I have been together almost 18 years and I can't think of anybody else that I would consider family.
So, among their legal strategies, a healthcare proxy, a durable power of attorney, and a will.
We consider ourselves married, whether the state does or not, and that we wanted as much protection as we could get for each other. And that was very important.
It's all about financial security in preparation for the inevitable, the death of a partner. Because when it comes to spousal benefits like Social Security and pension, same-sex couples are not allowed to collect, with very few exceptions. 401ks are treated differently too. Taxed heavily if a same-sex partner dies, not at all if you were married. And the same for estate and inheritance taxes. Same-sex couples are taxed where married couples are not.
They're, blatantly unfair for people who are living very, very similar lifestyles, who love each other, who have put into the system just like anybody else, but are not getting anything out of the system.
In fact, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force estimates that gay elders lose up to $124 million a year in would-be Social Security benefits alone.
There's a theme that I'm treated as a second-class citizen.
But the news is not all bad. As Meryl and Pat learned, there is help out there from legal and financial experts, both gay and straight. In fact, a few of the bigger investment firms like Merrill Lynch have even created departments devoted specifically to LGBT clients. But being prepared must start with the individual.
Don't bury your head in the sand. You need to stop and think about your future and where you want your future to be, and you're the only one that can control it.
Still, whether it's housing or health care, Meryl and Pat feel that these are not issues just for gay seniors, rather for the entire gay community, especially as the huge baby boom generation races towards retirement. A gay or lesbian baby boomer turns 50 in this country every single minute. And with a little organization and planning, it's this generation that could at least begin to affect the change needed.
We are people who expect the government and the society to respond to real needs, and we'll make it happen if we have to make it happen. That's our generation. That's part of who we were. So that's not going to change.
As much as gays and lesbians might be just like everybody else, under the law, we are not. We are, in fact, deemed legal strangers from our partners, unless we protect ourselves. Documents like domestic partnership agreements, health care proxies, durable powers of attorney, and living wills create rights and a legal recognition of our relationships that we don't otherwise have. So please, if you're in a partnership, find your local family or estate attorney and begin the process of safeguarding your family. I'm Leslie Gore, and you're watching In the Life.
Still to come on In the Life. Boys will be boys.
I used to have bruises on my arms from this pastor's son.
A change-up in America's favorite pastime.
Kind of a Hallmark card with sodomy.
And Harvey has the last word.
Ain't that good news?
While issues like treating disease and navigating the aging process crop up as obvious health concerns, the physical integrity of many in the LGBT community is threatened most frequently by the very real danger of physical violence. Walk Like a Man follows the story of one student's fight for his safety in the halls of a public high school. And this episode's Reel to Reel, Simon and I, traces the lives and the work of two South Africans who managed to secure gay and lesbian civil rights when, as black people under apartheid, they were not even citizens of their own country.
I am black and I'm gay. I cannot separate the two parts of me into secondary or primary struggle. They will be all one struggle.
Simon and I is about Simon Nkoli, who was a mentor of mine, who was a leader in the ANC movement anti-apartheid. He was jailed for a long time. And he came out as being gay and then kind of started the gay movement as it happened in the early 90s and in Johannesburg in particular. You know, started the first Pride March and that type of thing. It's also a history of how the South African gay and lesbian movement emerged all the way to when the Constitution passed sexual orientation.
In the late 1980s, apartheid had reached a fever pitch. Blacks continued to be classified as non-citizens, and the South African political and social climate was in turmoil. Within this oppressive setting, anti-apartheid activist Simon Nkoli formed GLOW, the gay and lesbian organization of Witwatersrand, adding sexual orientation to his fight for equal rights.
When I first met Simon, it was at the first meeting of GLOW, and for whatever reason, I just felt that I should be one of the people that's like standing right next to him, you know? Largely because there wasn't any black queer woman coming out at that time. So he taught me a lot. He was a very, very good friend.
That first Pride was one of the best days of my life, but I was on TV that night. It was a religious show, and a priest was saying, these people should be killed. All of a sudden, I was getting funny looks from people in the street. I thought, uh-oh, what have I done? 2 days later, I was sitting in my room when I heard voices outside calling my name. I ran into the lounge and my granny opened the door and told me to hide. About 20 angry men were surrounding our house, demanding that I come with them so they could teach me a lesson. The worst thing was that they threatened to take my grandma if I didn't go with them.
One of you utla walin. Ke khaba mama getting ba omongaro akena omongare he as hambi. Ile hore ba batla go bontsha gore o mosadi how gay ba tshojwa.
Today, the world is going to know that we here in South Africa have been oppressed for too long. We can't stand it anymore. Why do we have to fight for the right to love who we want to love? I have like several underlying reasons for wanting to tell the story, but I think the first thing was to acknowledge Simon Nkoli for who and what he really was. I needed to make sure that that's known, that this is the man who started this movement in this way. And it's not like there was no movement. There were organizations in South Africa before Simon Nkoli came along, but they were very white male, and there was nothing that could unify black, gay, and lesbian or any other people of color, basically, inside the movement. So that's really what he sparked, a self-confidence amongst young gay people to actually have them stand up for themselves. And that first Pride March was ingenious. It was at the right moment, you know, all races came together. Everyone had this vision.
That was organized in 1990, the same year Nelson Mandela was released from prison. 4 years later, the results of these two events would converge following the first all-race elections in South Africa. As the newly elected president, Nelson Mandela proposed a constitution that guaranteed equal rights to all citizens. The constitution was approved in 1996.
They speak of a constitutional
democratic political order in which, regardless of color, gender, religion, political opinion, or sexual orientation, the law will provide for the equal protection of all our citizens.
South Africa is one of, I think, the only one still with a constitution that includes sexual orientation under the Bill of Rights, yeah? And that is still a phenomenal thing to a lot of people around the world.
After the constitutional fight was won, Simon formed the Township AIDS Project, which Bev joined as an AIDS educator specializing in lesbian health issues. Soon, this change in focus saw Bev and Simon going their separate ways. Simon's battle with AIDS was a personal one, as he himself was HIV positive, and his work became more and more devoted to this singular cause, while Bev defined her role as a spokesperson for women's issues. It would be the 10th anniversary of GLOW that would bring the two back together.
I think we're very lucky in South Africa to be talking today after 10 years of our struggle. I mean, it's 10 years. I'm talking about when GLOW was formed, because there was nothing was happening before that.
Simon passed away a week after we did the first filming with Bev and Simon, and so we had to change our perspective a little bit. I think for Bev, speaking for Bev, emotionally, a very brave movie. She put her heart and soul on the screen, and I think there were some rocky times there, but she came through.
It was really my vision to make sure that the history comes out and just the acknowledging of the person who meant a lot for all of us, even to people who don't know that this was the guy that actually gets you walking in the street a little freer than normal, you know.
We are the luckiest generation of lesbians and gays to have had such a fearless, selfless visionary for a leader. I am me because of him. We are all we because of him. I know his soul will rest in peace. He did his work, and he did it beautifully.
I'm Stacey Ann Chin.
I'm Dan Pintaro.
Carol Channing. Rachel True. Marissa Dart-Winoker.
Phelan Harris. I'm Rufus Wainwright. I'm Paris Barkley.
And you're watching.
And you're watching. And you're watching the Emmy Award nominated.
Gay and Lesbian News Magazine.
In the Life.
In the Life.
In the Life.
A rash of recent studies on bullying in schools has produced a number of alarming statistics. Every 7 minutes, a student is bullied. 85% of the time, no one intervenes. And according to the National Institute of Mental Health, LGBT youth, and those who are perceived to be, are perhaps the most frequent targets.
Kids just treat you like you're lower just because of your sexuality, and I don't think that's right. I'd get paper thrown at me or notes in the hallway that just said fag, gay. I'd hear kids call me faggot, or, oh, here comes gay Scott. It made me feel low and like I didn't want to even get up in the morning. I still don't want to get up in the morning, you know, I'm 17, but it's just, I really just didn't want to get up and start my day because I know that it was already ruined.
Bullying's been with us since the beginning of time, and for that reason, people tend to minimize bullying, to say, well, kids will grow out of it, everybody experiences it, etc. In fact, bullying is incredibly destructive.
Do you have any memory of being bullied?
Maybe like pushed into a fence, being surrounded by a whole bunch of guys.
I used to have bruises on my arms from this pastor's son.
What would he do to you?
He would just like be like, I'm gonna pound you. I wouldn't want to go to school because I was so afraid of what was going to be happening when I got there, and it was really terrifying.
Bullying can take a lot of different forms. There's harassment, verbal harassment.
Fucking faggot.
A fairy.
Sissy boy.
Butterfingers.
There's a lot of physical bullying that goes on.
One day in the pool, he popped me in the face.
All four jumped out, two of them with 2x4s, and they came after us ready to kill us.
Forcibly removing my underwear while I was still wearing it.
About every month, 160,000 kids skip school because they don't feel safe there. Gay and lesbian students are more likely to be threatened, more likely to be physically harassed, and a fairly large percentage have reported that at some point they've been beaten to the point of needing medical attention. When you are continually harassed, that takes up all of your mental space and attention. It's very difficult when you're trying just to survive throughout the school day to focus on learning. So these kids are not only being physically threatened, emotionally harassed, but they're also missing their education.
This kid came over to my table while I was eating lunch one day, and he had kept on harassing me like all year long. So he came over and just said to me, "Hey, you effing faggot, you enjoying your pudding, sweetie?" And I said, "Yeah, actually I am." He goes, "Yeah, go figure." So I was already really mad that day, and I just didn't feel like dealing with him anymore. And I got to the point where I was so angry at him, I just threw the pudding on his brand new shirt. So after that happened, him and 3 of his friends started just beating the crap out of me and throwing me on the top of a table and just beating me until I was on the ground. And then the nurse and the principals and stuff came to stop the fight, and there were some of my friends on top of these kids just beating the crap out of them too. And one of the vice principals got hit during this fight. There were 650 kids around just staring and watching a fight, not doing anything. And so a big crowd gathered up around me, and I started bleeding and everything, and they rushed me into the nurse's office. My mom had to come pick me up that day, obviously. I had to go to the emergency room, and it turns out that I had a fractured nose and a couple chipped teeth that I had to get fixed. And the school tried to suspend me for a day for throwing pudding at this kid who just beat me up and constantly harassed me. Meanwhile, they were not keeping documents on this kid harassing me or hurting me.
The adults in the school environment often don't get involved. They don't step in to call harassment what it is when they see it. Most of the kids in our survey reported that teachers did not step in, did not get involved. And the gay kids who we interviewed said that 4 out of 5 of those kids said that they did not have even one supportive adult in their school.
The following day, I went in and gave my taped statement to the police officer, and he told me that all this news and media and stuff were coming to the police station. And he said basically they are going to find a way to get in touch with you, so be aware and keep your mouth closed. Well, I told my mom that I was tired of keeping my mouth closed. Thursday, I was handing out papers to advertise a protest for that Monday, and a couple of them got to the principal. And he called me in during my lunch period, and I said, "Well, I'm a diabetic, I have to eat lunch, you know, I'd be happy to discuss this with you later." And he said if I left his office that I would be suspended, because he didn't like the fact that there was all this media going around the school already now. There were already a couple articles out in the papers. As soon as I walked out of the principal's office, he told me I was suspended for 10 days, and I said, fine. And these other 3 kids that beat me up got suspended 5 to 7 days at the time. So Monday came around, so I went right across the street from the school, and we held up signs, we were screaming. About 50 people came total throughout the entire day. Superior Court of New Jersey. I have a bunch more of these, I just don't know where they are right now, but this is the first one that I put in the book. It was from one of the kids that beat me up. They had to write me a letter of apology, and it says, "Scott, I'm sorry for doing what I did. It was wrong, and next year, don't feel threatened because nothing will happen. It's over." And then he signed his name. Most of the kids we interviewed didn't think that
anti-gay bullying was appropriate, felt that it wasn't fair, that people shouldn't be treated badly, but only 5% of those kids were verbal about that in their school environment, actually stood up against bullies. And we think that if the adults in their lives, primarily parents but also teachers and others, were more vocal about why bullying is inappropriate, we think these kids would be more encouraged to stand up against it themselves and also create an environment where bullying's not a cool thing to do.
Now they actually call down students. This kid that was picking on me, the football star, he got called down while he was in the same class with me, so I know that they talked to him, and he was gone out of the classroom for a long time. So that's a good sign, and since then the kid hasn't said anything to me. And what surprises me is after all this finally blew over, there must be 10 kids that I know that came up to me and said, you know, I'm gay, I'm bi, I am a lesbian, and it completely shocked me. I don't look at it as a win-lose situation. I look at it as I told them that I'm not putting up with this. And I went to the extreme to do it too, but I had to, otherwise it wasn't gonna stop.
A recent study showed that slurs against gay people with words like faggot or dyke are constant in high schools, and many times it leads to violence. If you have any connection with youth, let them know that harassment of their gay peers is just not cool. Young people are hungry for role models, so be one.
For the past year in the Broadway show Take Me Out, I've played Mason Marzak, the fictional alter ego of the show's playwright, Richard Greenberg. Richard's close friend, our special guest, Patricia Clarkson, recalls the show's origins.
Take Me Out is a provocative drama written by a great playwright. It throws a curve at America's most beloved sport and chronicles the fallout among the New York Empires on and off the field. By having one of his players come out in the All-American Boys Club of baseball, Rich challenges the stereotypes around gay men's relationship to sports and vice versa.
If I'm gonna have sex, and I am, because I'm young and rich and famous and talented and handsome, so it's a law, I'd rather do it with a guy, but when all is said and done, Kippy, I'd rather just play ball.
It's focused through the lens of baseball, but it examines so many issues, you know, in contemporary American society that many times don't get examined.
It's obviously got its finger on the pulse. It can't take forever. I mean, at some point, somebody's got to come out.
The award-winning playwright of Eastern Standard, 3 Days of Rain, and The Dazzle ran across what became the genesis of Take Me Out in the summer of 2000.
And ripped into left field for a base hit.
I was watching TV one night, and I happened on a Yankees game. In '96 and '98, I had sort of vaguely accidentally become engrossed in the World Series because it was sort of a civic duty at that point. Those were the years that the Yankees returned after a long hiatus, and discovered that the game was interesting. I had never suspected that before. So when I happened on this game in 2000 with nothing else to do, I thought it would be a good idea to sort of legitimize my emotion by putting in my time in the regular season.
2 strikeouts in the inning.
And within a few days, I was obsessed.
Another thing I like is the home run trot. Okay. Not that mad dash around the bases when it's an inside the ballpark home run.
Couldn't really think or focus on anything else, and reevaluated everything in my life by its relationship to baseball. I mean, it's insane, but I copped to it. Anyway, and at the same time, I realized that I was a playwright. That was my profession, that I wasn't going to be commissioner of baseball.
I am talking about that graceful little canter. When the ball has been crushed and it's missing and the outcome is not in doubt, what I like about it is it's so unnecessary. The ball is gone!
It was about that time that Billie Bean, the former utility player, came out 4 years after leaving the game.
I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, wow, you know, if I had seen a story about a kid named Billie Bean playing baseball who admitted that, you know, he was a gay man, I wouldn't have gotten married, and I would have confronted my sexuality so much sooner. And I think I would have saved a lot of people a lot of heartache.
I believe it was he who said that the only way someone could stay in the game and come out was if he were an already established superstar. That was my angle. You know, I'll write about an already established superstar who comes out.
Take Me Out first stepped up to the plate at the Dunbar Warehouse in London, hitting home runs with critics and audiences alike, and continued its winning streak on Broadway at the Walter Kerr Theater.
The whole mess started one morning when Darren Lemming said to himself, "What the hell? I'm Darren Lemming, and that is a very good thing."
He is the perfect balance between black and white. He's a perfect balance between standoffish and affectionate. He's a god, but he's an approachable god. And now suddenly he's gay.
I don't mean for this to be a distraction. I'm hoping this is going to ward off distractions. And if, incidentally, there's any kid out there who's struggling with his identity, I hope this sends a message that it's okay. They can follow their dream no matter what. Any young man, creed, whatever, can go out there and become a ball player. Yeah. Or an interior decorator.
I think that Darren comes out to own himself in a larger sense. I don't think he does it to mystify the public. I don't think he does it to intrigue people or to evoke sympathy or adulation. He does it for him.
You told me to reveal my true nature. You said I could only do this through love. That's before I knew you were a pervert.
It makes the rest of the guys more uncomfortable than it makes Darren. He's such a untouchable superstar that he just kind of gets more motivated and plays better, whereas everyone else starts to think, well, what does this make me? If I'm in the shower or in the locker room with this guy who's gay, what are people now thinking about me? And that kind of has this domino effect.
This is about something that's about identity. And sexuality in this country is still taboo, especially in a bastion of masculinity like sports. You're going to the core of what it is to be a man, and to challenge that through sexuality is really terrifying.
Darren Lemming meets Shane Mungat.
Shane is the instrument of Darren's self-destruction. And Darren says, God can get me, but short of God, there's nobody. And then Shane comes in.
Didn't you ever go to foster homes or something like that?
Oh, yeah, but they returned me.
Returned? Why was that? Were you already offensive as a youth, Shane?
Shane symbolizes to Darren, you know, all of the things that he despises or that he's fought against or tried to resist, you know, in terms of, you know, his dealings with people. And I think that Darren does the same thing for Shane, just rubs him the wrong way. You put two people like that in an environment like that, and you're bound to have some sparks fly.
And it seems the sparks in Take Me Out may be a sign of things to come. While the show was running in London, former NFL football player Esra Tuwalo came out to America on national television.
What is the secret?
That I'm gay. That's the big secret.
We seem to see out homosexuals in most fields of endeavor in this country now. But team sports has a separate aura and a separate tradition and seems to be the hardest field to crack.
What my biggest fear was total rejection, basically, and feeling like the 11 years that I killed myself to make it to that level would be just swept aside or erased with the big word homosexual tattooed on my picture.
It just seems like one of those questions that's just really bubbling up in the zeitgeist right now. We're so fascinated by what goes on in stars' lives, and especially icons, and sports superstars are icons.
I had this idea about you and this guy, and me and Susan and the three kids having dinner.
Oh. So you have this sort of neo-comfy image floating through your head. I see. Kind of a Hallmark card with sodomy.
The more that athletes that might be, you know, at the end of their career or done, kind of water down the idea that there's never been a gay athlete on a major league field or an NBA court or NFL field, then all of a sudden it starts to, you know, kind of mainstream the idea in society, and then we get closer and closer to a day when it's just a non-issue.
A team is like the military, unit cohesion. I think it's a fiction that a gay person couldn't fit into that unit, but there seems to be a standard idea
that unit cohesion suffers when you have a gay person in the ranks.
I think the fag is the other in team sports. I think that's the term, that's the epithet that's used. So for what you don't want to be, and I think kids growing up in sports learn that before they even know what they're talking about. So it's a deeply entrenched male heterosexual preserve, and I think it's it seems to be the last one to go.
I think it still is this closetedness that's keeping us back. Go back to where you grew up and come out to your pastor, come out to your teachers, come out to your neighbor. So they go, oh, Joe Black, he's gay, but he's not anything what I've seen on TV or what I've heard. That really makes a difference in the long run if you make it personal. And so I still think that's the key really to our making more of a progress, is for more people to be out. This is Martina Navratilova, and you are watching In the Life.
Finally, In the Life's Harvey Fierstein evaluates the year 34, post-Stonewall.
So what happened was, these words are making me nervous. What happened was, you're in my key light. Well, so far that's not offensive. Come on, Papa, what do you say? So it's June again, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and two-spirit month. Time for the parades and parties and fundraisers. It's also occasion to tally the gains and losses that the last year brought. We've got good news on the political front with a record 9 state senators seated. There are, in fact, 241 openly gay, lesbian, or bisexual elected officials now serving, including the first openly gay, Indian, and Latinos. Non-discrimination bills have also had good luck this year. Well, if you don't count the watering down of the New York State bill. Seems somebody sold out our transgender members in a backroom deal. Ah, politicians, gay or straight, you just can't trust them. Good news also in the TV world, as Queer as Folk and 6 Feet Under remain hits with viewers. And there are several gay-themed pilots in the works for next season. Gay characters are down overall in network TV shows and Hollywood films, but they're up in cable. And now it looks like we're getting the first 24-hour American gay and lesbian cable network, as well as the first 24-hour-a-day satellite radio station created just for us. So I guess all in all, we're moving on up, just like we did last year, and the year before, and the year before that one. Slow and steady does win the race, right? Well, I did witness one more evident sign of progress. I was asked to help promote this year's National Coming Out Day. A press event was scheduled at a large record store in Midtown Manhattan, and the organizers rallied the community celebrities to carry their message. It's safe to come on out of the closet. Guess what? No one showed up. Well, a couple of minor photographers, a couple of reporters from gay papers, a couple of members of the public, but all in all, it was a huge waste of time and effort, and I couldn't have been happier. Coming out has become as newsworthy as reporting the weather. Now, I ain't saying that everyone's out. We know that's not true. And I'm not saying that our youngsters don't need our support in finding themselves and adjusting to the realities of living in a straight world. But as far as carrying the message, it's been received loud and clear. We're here, we're not so queer, they're used to us. Yes, my friends, if National Coming Out Day is any barometer of progress, then we've hit a new plateau. We are at last just plain everyday folks. Ain't that good news?
I'm Denis O'Hare. For all of us at In the Life here in New York, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Ford Foundation, the Gill Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, the Pride Foundation, the Ted Snowden Foundation, the Reed Williams Foundation, Adam, a funding collaborative empowering queer youth, Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, Michael A. Lepin, Daniel H. Renberg and Eugene Kabalowski, and the annual support of In the Life members like you.